धीरं कृतकृत्यं चडुलं स्फुटतरनिपुणं कर्मं पाडामि नाडिन कावल संगीतं നേടാം നന്മതൻ സ്നേഹം സന്തോഷം തേടാമെന്നെന്നും ശാന്തിതൻ സന്ദേശം ചേരാം നേരിന്റെ ലോകം കണ്ടെത്താം സത്യം പാലിക്കാം നിത്യം രക്ഷിക്കാം നിൽക്കുമ്പോൾ മൃദുഭാവം ദൃഢകൃത്യം ഇത് സേന നമ്മുടെ സേന
ഞങ്ങൾക്കും നിങ്ങളാശ്രയം എന്നെന്നും നൽകും സാന്ത്വനം വഴികാട്ടുവാൻ ജനമൈത്രിയായി
കയ്യെത്തും ദൂരത്തെ സേന എന്നെഞ്ചിൻ കാവൽ നിരതം ഭയഭയരഹിതം വീരം കൃതകൃത്യം ചടുലം സ്ഫുടതരനിപുണം കർമ്മം അതിശക്താനിപുണം സ്വയം നിജ ഹൃദയം കടുകഠിനം ചലനം മൃദുമൃദുരം പ്രിയവചനം രക്ഷാനിരതം ഭയഭയരഹിതം വീരം കൃതകൃത്യം ചടുലം സ്ഫുടതരനിപുണം കർമ്മം നമ്മുടെ സേന.
Hey all, hello and welcome to all joining us here today. I'm Meera Jaydevan, member of the organizing team here at Hackbee 2021. We at Kerala Police Cyberdome are delighted to bring forth the 5th edition of our hackathon, Hackbee 2021. This year our aim is just a little more than just a competition. This hackathon we are building a single solution with the help of participants and mentors to equip the police force to unravel the mysteries of dark web. Before we begin, let's take this opportunity to thank our pillars of support. We have Beagle Security as our technology partner, Cloud4C as our cloud partner, Mashup Stack as our knowledge partner, Ecoloop 360 as our sustainability partner, and Federal Bank and ICICI as our banking partners. Our community partners include ICMEC, RaaS, BCS India Affiliate, ASRG, Isaka Trivandrum Chapter, Nalcon, GTEC ATFG, and AWS UG Kochi. We would also like to thank our partners, Be Safe and We Console. Thank you all for the support shown in organizing Hackbee. Today we have our 8th live tech talk and we are extremely delighted to have with us Mr. Derek Fisher, Security MVP, Securely Built. Mr. Fisher has spent decades in the computer engineering field with the last 10 years in the cybersecurity as a leader, speaker, and instructor. His passion has been to take the complex security topics and make them simple and easy to understand. He holds several security certifications and teaches cybersecurity at Temple University, where he is also an external advisory board member to the cybersecurity program. Before I hand over to Mr. Fisher, I would like to let the audience know that they can drop in their queries in the comments on the Hackbee's Facebook and YouTube channels, and we will be responding to the queries at the end of the session. So with great pleasure, I invite Mr. Derek Fisher to throw some bright light into the topic ransomware in 2021 for the 8th session in this live Tech Talk series. So the stage is all yours. Please.
Thank you very much and welcome everybody. And as was mentioned, my name's Derek Fisher. I won't go back over everything there, but I've been in engineering for quite some time. Past several years, I've been in software security, primarily in the application security space. I do teach at university here in Philadelphia, which is in the state of Pennsylvania in the United States. And if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. So we're going to talk a little bit about ransomware. I'm sure everyone, has a good understanding of ransomware and how it occurs. But you have some data. You have a bad guy. That bad guy or bad person is able to access that data and lock it up, and then they demand money. And today, it's not so much that they're demanding money, but a lot of the ransom demands are they request cryptocurrency, and we're going to talk a little bit about that here in a moment. So ransomware isn't new. It's been obviously gaining a lot of traction lately in the news and elsewhere. But ransomware started in 1989, and there was a AIDS researcher. So AIDS, the virus. There was a researcher that was doing research on trying to find ways to combat the AIDS pandemic, and that researcher, was able to put malware on floppy disks and pass that out to several other researchers. And when that occurred, the files that those researchers were working on were encrypted and held essentially for extortion. So it was the first known ransomware attack. And in years past, you saw a lot of ransomware attacks against individuals. So people that would open up a link or open up an attachment that had malware in it would have their personal computers or personal devices encrypted. And today we're seeing that shift to target more corporations. And again, we hear a lot about that in the news. It's primarily corporations now that are being targeted. So there's two types of ransomware. The first one is crypto, which is basically where data is encrypted. And the second type of ransomware is what we call locker. And that means a device is actually not necessarily encrypted, but made unusable. And so we hear a lot about the crypto type ransomware. That's probably the most prevalent, but the locker type still exists. And so there's some different types of well-known types of ransomware that have been around recently. So Bad Rabbit's one, spread through a fake Adobe Flash update, and impacted mostly Russia and Eastern Europe. CryptoLocker's probably one of the better known ones, or most heard about one. It's early ransomware, and there's been a lot of different variations of that throughout the years. Petya was a locker type because it would encrypt the master boot record, therefore making the device or the system unusable. Ryuk is a new one that came around recently. It's one of the most popular ones, targeting companies, hospitals, and governments. And then Spider, there's a couple different variations of Spider, but that's spread throughout Europe by spam email and through a Microsoft Word macro. And then I'm sure everyone's heard of WannaCry, which was several years ago. It's probably the most famous one. It hit a lot of different countries, a lot of big organizations. The health services in the United Kingdom or in England were one of the big targets that were hit. And then just to kind of further talk about that story, you may remember there was an individual that was able to find the kill switch for WannaCry and basically stop the attack from continuing to happen. He was kind of shown to be a bit of a hero for the ransomware attack that was occurring at the time. So we're seeing some additional types of ways that ransom and the extortion works here in the past couple years. So, the first type of ransom is where the files or device is locked, and then the attacker will reach out to the individual or the organization and demand money for making that data either unencrypted again or unlocking the device. So that's kind of the normal run-of-the-mill ransomware, where something gets locked, the attacker will reach out and say, "Hey, I'll bring you back to a good state if you just pay me some money." And then there's been a little bit of an evolution on that recently, where if an organization fails to pay, the attacker will then threaten to release the data. So they haven't just encrypted the data, but they've stolen the data. And we've seen a lot of this recently, where again, before they encrypt the data, they'll exfiltrate the data to some server that they maintain, encrypt the data, and then demand payment to unencrypt. And if the organization fails to pay or refuses to pay, then what they'll do is actually then threaten to release that information out. The third type of extortion or ransom threats that are made are when the bad actor is going to threaten to do a distributed denial of service attack against the victim if they don't pay the ransom. And then the last one, which is the quadruple ransom here, where the bad actor uses the data that they've stolen, and then they'll actually reach out to the individuals that are impacted by that data. So in other words, if the attacker went after like a hospital or medical facility and they stole medical records, a lot of that has sensitive information in it. Could be diagnosis. It could be just personal information that's part of that medical record. They'll actually, go through these different steps of they'll lock it. They'll then threaten to release all the information to the organization, or if the organization doesn't pay, and then they'll actually go after the individuals that are part of that data breach and demand ransom from them. Saying that, hey, I have your medical record. I will release it if you don't pay me some amount of money. So it's pretty interesting to see how creative some of these attackers are getting once they have that information and once they're able to make contact with people and demand ransom. So there are gangs that do this for a living, and a lot of them are doing this as a regular job, like a 9-to-5 job. They work Monday through Friday. They'll come into an office or some other group location, and they'll get to work trying to compromise systems, steal data, and threaten people with extortion. So one of the probably the best known, at least recently, is DarkSide. And the reason why they're probably pretty well known right now is that they are the ones that were behind the Colonial Pipeline attack here in the United States, which basically shut off oil production in the southeast, which southeast up to the mid east. So it's a huge portion of the United States, which was and it created a lot of panic. There was a lot of people that were, even during lockdown, here, there were a lot of people that were rushing out to get gas because it was in very short supply. So for about a week, there was long lines to get into gas stations. The gas prices shot up around the rest of the country. And so it was a pretty impactful attack. So DarkSide was believed to be behind that. They took responsibility for it. But shortly after that, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, shortly after that, they quote unquote went out of business because their servers were confiscated. So Wizard Spider is another one that's believed to be Russian-based. They are known for attacking the health service executive, which is the Ireland's healthcare system, and targeting other commercial healthcare facilities. There's Babuk Locker, which is claims to be retiring from ransomware and moving on to other malicious activities. They were back a few months ago. They were responsible for attacking the Washington D.C. Police Department, and after that attack, there was a lot of heat that was put on them due to that high level of attack. That they believe that ransomware is no longer something that they want to be in. They want to go do some other types of malicious activity. Revil is a pretty popular one as well. They're responsible for the JBS food attack, which was shortly after the Colonial Pipeline, so several weeks ago. They attacked one of the largest meat producers here in the United States, and again, similar situation to the Colonial Pipeline, where the JBS food organization was basically shut down for a good few days or a week, and same situation where meat was no longer being produced and shipped, and so the prices went up again. There was a shortage of meat in grocery stores and things like that. So again, it was a similar type of situation as the Colonial Pipeline. Again, these are believed to be a Russian-based group, ransomware group, and they were actually one of the kind of the interesting parts of the JBS food attack was that Revil wasn't necessarily targeting the United States. They were actually initially trying to target Brazilian entities. For some reason, that didn't go the way it was supposed to go, and instead, they ended up attacking JBS Food. Maze claims to be officially closed. They went out of business, I guess, when they were threatening to publish data or when they weren't getting paid. They targeted many engineering and manufacturing organizations to gain intellectual property. So they were mostly targeting those organizations to steal data, gain intellectual property for the purpose of potentially selling it to other organizations and so forth. And we're going to talk a little bit about RaaS, which is a new type of ransomware activity that's going on. And that's really, we're going to see how these groups kind of either merge or morph a little bit over time. But again, we'll talk about that here in a minute. So how does ransomware really work? And it comes down to, if you look here at the bottom left, you have malware that gets onto a system, and that can happen many different ways. A lot of times it's through email, could be a phishing attack where somebody sends you a email with a link or an attachment that has, some type of script either in the attachment, or, if you go to the link that's in the email, it might take you to a site that has malicious scripts running on it. But one way or the other, somebody is able to get malware. And actually, there's not just through email, but sometimes a thumb drive, if you plug in a thumb drive into a system, maybe that has malware on it. There's many different ways that malware can get onto a system. But once that malware gets onto a system, and this could be your personal computer, this could be your work laptop or work system in your office or at home. Once it gets on there, it starts immediately encrypting, especially depending on the type of depending on the type of ransomware. It could be looking for specific files. It could be just lying in wait and watching activity before it tries to encrypt things. It really depends on the group that's trying to perform this ransomware attack, and it also depends on the organization that's being targeted. So, for instance, in the previous slide, when we talked about the maze that's trying to go after intellectual property, they may just lie in wait and keep looking for information leading them to the crown jewels of a organization where they know they can get some good intellectual property. Or it could just be a blind encryption, or it could be something that's just going to try to lock the system, a locker type of ransom, where it's going to try to just corrupt or encrypt the maybe a file system so that the device itself can't be used. But one way or the other, malware gets on to the system. It targets specific files or specific areas of the system, and it will encrypt. So the step one here, the victim is infected by the ransomware, and then the attackers will usually somehow get in a hold of the victim. So it could be something within the malware that pops up a notice on the screen that says, "Hey, you've been victim of ransomware. Go here to pay to get your files decrypted." And then the victim will send typically Bitcoin to the criminal. The criminal will then confirm the payment, and then they will try to move that money around in different wallets in order to try to hide that money. And they'll also look at possibly some ways to launder the money, meaning that they're going to try to clean it. They could do that through a lot of different ways. I won't get into that, but there's a lot of different ways that you can launder that money. And then they'll use that Bitcoin to either make purchases, or they'll cash it out into regular fiat currency. So in 2021, there's been a lot of activity. In fact, I only pulled out 6 here, but in 2021, there's been a significant uptick in ransomware type of attacks. So you see here in the top left, the primary areas or industries that have been targeted. Services, education, government have been at the top of the list. Technology and manufacturing are not far behind. And then healthcare continues to be up there as well. And you see the countries that are being attacked, primarily United States, and some other countries as well that are being hit, but it's primarily the United States. And just to tease out a couple companies that have been hit, again, there's been a lot that have happened just so far in the first couple months here in 2021. But Bose Corporation, they had to disclose a data breach following a ransomware attack earlier in the year. Toyota, they were hit by 2 cyber attacks that in 2021, mostly in the supply chain, but they were hit twice. Upstocks, India's second largest stockbroker firm, had to do a password reset for millions of traders after learning that there was a huge data breach. And then Nest Digital Engineering Company in Israel was hit by a Ragnar locker, which again will lock up systems, not necessarily data. And then I'm going to mess up that name, but Pimpri Smart City project in India were infected with ransomware. And the attackers were demanding Bitcoin for decrypting the lost information. And then MIDC in India, again, revealed a ransomware attack had infected its IT systems. So again, there was many different companies to pick from when I was putting this together. It was just, it's a little bit sad to see how many organizations have been hit just in the first couple months of 2021. So there are some newer techniques that are coming out recently. And we're seeing ransomware-as-a-Service that is becoming pretty popular. And what this really means is we may be familiar with the software-as-a-service, where there's a organization that will make their services available basically on like a subscription, subscription style. So, you may want to try to, just get maybe stock information, and there may be a organization that offers some way for you to get that on a subscription type basis. And they're going to host that in the cloud, and you can access that, through programming some APIs or something like that. Well, very similar to that, there's Ransomware-as-a-Service now, which basically is a turnkey solution, meaning that if I wanted to go and ransomware, some organization, instead of developing, the software myself and developing all the different components of the ransomware, I can just go to a platform that will have all that for me. I pay them either a flat fee to have, similar to the way you would buy software, just pay a flat fee and get that, get access to their ransomware kit. I can pay a monthly fee and then have some kind of profit sharing with the Ransomware-as-a-Service organization. You can have, just a one-time license fee, no profit sharing, and then, pure profit sharing. That's, a little bit of where, maybe it's a 50-50 split between the ransomware service and yourself. And so these kits are available that allow for, fast deployment, and it's very inexpensive. Again, you don't have to develop the code. It's already done for you. You just point and click, at an organization, and then let the ransomware as a service do its thing. There are advertisements for these on the dark web. So if you go out onto the Tor network and you go to some of these Tor sites, you're going to see advertisements for, hey, come here and use Joe's ransomware service here, and they're advertised on these dark websites. And then some of them actually even include 24/7 technical support. They have user reviews, and they have forums and so forth. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment here. So the other thing that makes ransomware a lot easier for people to, for these malicious actors to perform these ransomware attacks is that, cryptocurrency has become very popular. It used to be that if you were going to ransom somebody, you had to get that cash, had to get the money somehow. And that was very traceable. So the police organizations, the federal level policing organizations, or statewide, or whatever the case is, it was very easy for them to track that money down, because there was, you had to involve banks, and you had to, that money is very traceable. Cryptocurrency, on the other hand, is very much less traceable. And so if you're looking at things like Bitcoin or Monero or any of the other cryptocurrencies that are out there, a lot of the appeal and benefit of those cryptocurrencies is that it's very difficult for someone to track down that money movement and the activity around, the purchasing and exchanging of that cryptocurrency. So they're going to make, attackers, when they ransom an organization or a person, they're going to ask for money to be paid in this cryptocurrency. Again, it could be Bitcoin. A lot of it is Bitcoin, just because that's most popular. And they're going to send a digital wallet to the victim and say, here, go buy some Bitcoin, deposit it into this digital wallet. And then there may be some stages of negotiation between the attacker and the victim. Generally, if the attacker says, I want $1 million to decrypt your data, you may go back and say, I don't have $1 million. How about, 500,000 or something like that. And so there may actually even be mediators in between. In other words, somebody that maybe it's a lawyer. If you're an organization, you have a lawyer that would go and actually negotiate on your behalf and try to get the payment down lower. So once the payment is made, the attacker will move between multiple wallets to try to disguise the activity, and then also not just move between wallets to disguise activity, but they may be paying others that were part of the attack. So generally ransomware is not always one person, performing the attack. It's usually a group of people that have been involved, especially at an organization level. And so, that money movement is potentially paying some of those other people that were involved. And then they may use money laundering techniques to clean the money. As I mentioned before, they're going to, try to move between, maybe they're going to, the popular way of money laundering before was, going to a casino or something like that and exchanging, some money there. I don't know whether that's still the way that money is laundered. I don't know anything about money laundering, but they're gonna. The whole idea there is to try to keep the money moving, so it's harder to track. The more you move it, the harder it is to track. So then the cryptocurrency is then exchanged into some type of fiat currency. So whatever. If they're gonna if they're based in Russia, they're gonna convert it into Russian money. If they're in the United States, they're going to convert it to dollar. If they're in India, they're going to convert it to Indian currency. But they're going to they want to then get the money out of that exchange. So there is no one cryptocurrency used in payment. Bitcoin has been the dominant one, but Monero has begun to be used because the biggest problem with Bitcoin has been that Bitcoin is extremely popular. There's a lot of there's a lot of eyes on Bitcoin. There's a lot of ways to track Bitcoin. Monero is less popular and less used, and therefore their attackers are usually asking for Monero. In fact, I had heard a story recently where it may have actually been the Colonial Pipeline, or maybe it was a different one, but where the attacker first asked for Monero. But they said if you're going to pay in Bitcoin, there was a premium. In other words, it wasn't, if you were going to pay $1, in Monero, it wasn't going to be $1 in Bitcoin. It was going to be maybe $1.50 or $2 in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's a little bit harder because of the activity around it and the attention. Bitcoin was going to be harder for them to launder. They were going to have to move it more. Whereas Monero, they were, it's less money movement. So they were willing to take either, but you would have to pay extra if you're going to use Bitcoin. So another technique that's starting to gain some popularity here is Escrow. And so with the rise of the ransomware-as-a-service, we're going to start seeing some consolidation around leading providers of this ransomware. And you're going to see growing base of affiliates or customers for those ransomware services. And the important part is that these ransomware-as-a-service, they're going to have to distinguish themselves. So you're going to have, price competition, different rates that are going to be appealing to affiliates. And you're going to also see these ransomware-as-a-service actors looking to get feedback, positive feedback, from affiliates saying, hey, I use this. I mean, it sounds silly, but it's going to be like Amazon or, any other type of, online organization that wants to get positive feedback. They're going to, look for users to say, hey, I used this service. It was great. Had no problem, got paid, all that other stuff. So we're going to start seeing more of those ransomware-as-a-service try to make themselves appealing to the affiliates so that they can then gain more money. So the dark side ransomware group, the ones that were responsible for the Colonial Pipeline, they went out of business when the FBI tracked them down and were able to confiscate their servers. And a lot of the affiliates were left unpaid and obviously were upset about not being paid. So, had they stayed in business, they would have probably had some negative feedback there that would have not helped their case, especially when they're going up against other ransomware groups. So as far as, the escrow goes, because of the fact that affiliates and the ransomware-as-a-service organizations, they want to get paid, you're probably going to start seeing where there's going to be a third party that will actually hold the money for the affiliates and the ransomware-as-a-service organization. They'll hold it in escrow so that everybody knows that they're going to get paid. It's basically a third-party service that's going to, hold that money for them and pay it out at a given point of time. And we've seen some of this already. Even with DarkSide was doing that. They were depositing some money in some locations to show, that they were serious about performing a ransomware attack, and they were trying to, get people on board. So what are the governments and corporations doing? So corporations are looking for government to do something, and government's looking for corporations to do something. So here in the United States, the White House, the new Biden administration had issued an executive order recently. And the goal of that executive order was just basically to tell corporations that they need to do more. And they laid out some tactics. None of that for cybersecurity professionals should have been much of a surprise there, but enable multi-factor authentication, which is not just using your password, username and password, but also maybe getting an SMS message on your phone or an email as another factor of authentication. Having endpoint protection, so in other words, making sure that the systems that you're working on have virus scanner and other types of software like that to make sure that ransomware doesn't occur in the first place, or like malware doesn't get on. Making sure that data is encrypted so that if somebody steals it, they can't get access to it. And this is the good side of encryption, where the corporations that house all that data, you want to encrypt it so that nobody has access to it except for the organization. You want to make sure that you have a skilled security team, make sure you have data backups, make sure you're patching, and have a response plan in place, and have that regularly tested. So again, none of that's really surprising to people that work in the cybersecurity space. This is all, basics of security. But in the executive order from the White House, the ransomware was singled out as a threat to core business operations, primarily because of the rise of ransomware attacks. And again, here in the United States, the Colonial Pipeline and the JBS attack both, showed that it's not just, ransomware is not just a problem where an attacker is trying to get money. Ransomware is a problem where you could cripple certain areas of a nation. Being able to shut down oil production in a very large area of the United States is a big deal. So that I think was pretty frightening for a lot of people. That it's gone beyond encrypting data and asking for money. It's going to the point of shutting down critical functions within a nation. So the government is looking for businesses to step up, and the government can't be everywhere at it, can't be everywhere all the time. And they want to make sure that corporations are know what needs to be done and are, stepping up to do that. So the FBI here in the United States, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, they've been doing this type of work, not just ransomware, but tracking down bad actors since they started. And so after the Colonial Pipeline attack, the FBI was actually able to get the Bitcoin wallet address that Colonials gave the FBI the address that they sent the Bitcoin to. And from there, the FBI was able to follow the money through all the different wallets that were then where the money was then exchanged to. And they actually were able to recuperate about half the money. So I think Colonial ended up paying, it was like $4.5 million or something like that. And the FBI was able to recuperate a little over 2 million. So about half of it. And the way they were able to do this was they watched the money move through these wallets until it got to one wallet that the FBI actually had access to. They haven't talked about how they got access to it, but I don't know. There was a lot of speculation on how they had access to that wallet. whether they owned it or whether they were able to compel somebody to hand over, the wallet. Either way, when the money landed in that wallet, the FBI was able to then seize it. So DarkSide, again, they were the ones responsible for that attack. When the FBI tracked down DarkSide and was able to get to their servers, they seized some of those servers there. They were able to actually recover more Bitcoin off of those servers. So this is a little bit of a different tactic with ransomware, in the sense that the FBI was actually going after those organizations that are performing these ransomware attacks and following the money and trying to get to it. And there's a little bit of a two sides of the coin here, because most organizations the recommendation is to not pay ransom, because then when you pay the ransom, you encourage the attackers to continue to do those types of attacks. So, but if they had not paid, if Colonial had not paid the ransom, the FBI would not have been able to track it down and basically shut down DarkSide. So it's a little bit of, they shouldn't have paid the ransom, but it's a good thing they did, because they were able to, track down DarkSide. So that's not always the case, though. So that, again, the recommendation is not to pay the ransom. So how do we protect? So there is no, silver bullet or no single tool that's going to protect against ransomware. And working in the cybersecurity space, there's a lot of, we try to find tools that are going to perform some activity that's going to protect us against some type of attack. There is no one tool that's going to defend against, ransomware. So it really comes down to what we call, defense in depth. And what that means is maintaining golden images of critical systems. And so that if something does happen to it, you can restore back quickly to that, to a known good state. You want to retain and regularly test backups. So making backups on a daily basis or an hourly basis, and making sure that you can restore from those backups. Because if your data does get encrypted, you can restore from those backups if that does happen. You want to have a security operations team in place. And what they do is they're going to do logging, monitoring, and incident response when something does occur. They're really the front line of defense when a malicious activity happens. You want to have endpoint protection and vulnerability scanning. So virus scanning, you want to have on your systems, but you also want to have external scans that occur that go around and look for vulnerabilities on those systems. You want to have regular patching and updating of software. And it really comes down to security awareness. So training users not to click on links, not to open attachments that they're not expecting. You want to make sure that, because that's generally how these things happen. It's not a attacker that's breaching firewalls, and not that this doesn't happen, but you don't generally see attackers that are breaching through all the different layers of defense and landing on a system, and and that's kind of what we call like Hollywood type of activity. Again, not that doesn't happen, but the easiest way for this to occur is to send a file with a script in it to a user. That user clicks on or opens up the file, the script runs, and then that's it. So the users are generally the softer target to get into an organization. So security awareness around what to look for, what to stay away from is important. And then the last resort is cyber insurance, which a lot of organizations have, which means that there's same with health insurance or car insurance. This cyber insurance will help in the event that something goes wrong. And generally they'll help negotiate, to get the ransomware down lower. And worst case, they'll pay the attackers. But most, advising organizations, again, they're gonna say don't pay the ransom, because it just encourages the ransomware attackers. And with that, I appreciate your time today. I hope this was informative, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. So now we are open to the Q&A. So please put in your queries in the comments on the social media handles. So we have a question from Anand. Does the Mac OS affected by ransomware?
Yeah, I don't think any system is immune to ransomware because really it's about the data. So it's about getting down to the data, and if you have data, then that's susceptible to ransomware attacks. So what I would say is some systems that are less. So usually malware will get on because there's a vulnerability on a system, right? So that the script, there might be a script or some other type of attack that's taking advantage of a vulnerability. That vulnerability might be a Windows vulnerability or a Linux vulnerability or a Mac vulnerability. So in that case, it could be targeting that specific system. But again, there's no system that's completely immune to ransomware.
So next question is from Abira. What are the steps that we can take to protect restoring point from the ransomware attack? Is there any tool available for the same?
So I want to make sure I understand here. You mean restoring like from backups? Because if you're talking about protecting the data from backup, what you generally want to do for backups is you do a local backup and then you take that backup offsite, so it's offline and away from the systems, because we've seen that happen as well, where the backups are encrypted as well, and attackers are getting smart about being able to follow where that data goes. So there are tools, like if you're talking about personal backups and things like that. I actually back up my data, my personal data, to AWS, and so I do local backups and then move that up to AWS every month. I think I have it set up. It's all automatic, so I don't really pay attention. But there are services out there that will back up your data for you on your system. There are applications and services out there that will do that for you.
Next is from Roy. How OSINT can help to investigate a ransomware case?
Yeah, it's more a question for somebody that's in SOC, security operations. But for the open source intelligence, if you're looking for to find out who the attackers are, I'm sure you have to be able to pick some information up in order to run it through those open source investigative techniques. But yeah, I'm not well equipped to answer that question. That's something for maybe somebody from the Security Operations Center.
Next question is from Shyam. It is learned that if the attack and encryption is in the offline mode, would be higher chance to decrypt. How it works?
If the attack and encryption is in the offline mode, you mind pulling that up again? Attack and encryption is in the offline mode.
Would be higher chance to decrypt.
If it's offline, I mean, there's not. If it's offline, it's a lower chance of being encrypted. Or do you mean? So if the attack and encryption is in the offline mode, be higher chance to decrypt. So in other words, if you got that encrypted data, would you be able to then decrypt it? Like if you're an organization or if you're a person and that data was, if you got the encrypted data, there's not an easy way. The way with the way the encryption works, if you don't have the decryption key, you're not going to be able to decrypt it unless it's really weak encryption, which is not generally the case with these ransomware attacks. So even if you have the data in an encrypted format, you're really unlikely to be able to decrypt that. So sorry, I hope I answered that. But
next is from Max Media. Does it affect entire network if one system affected with ransomware attack?
Yeah, it depends on the type of ransomware. Generally, what they're looking to do is go after databases or file systems. They're going to look for where the crown jewels are, and then they're going to try to encrypt that data. So usually if one system gets compromised, depending on the way that particular ransomware works, it's going to go look for other systems to start encrypting. So the short answer is most cases, yes, it will then go from one system to many in a short period of time.
Next question is from Security Tech. Is there any way to identify and prevent ransomware from encrypting the files using AV or EDR solutions?
Yeah, there are actually tools out there that claim that they'll be able to stop ransomware. I say claim because there's, again, attackers are, we like to say in security that we have to be right 100% of the time. The attackers only have to be right once. So they're getting more clever and understanding how to get around certain systems. For instance, in some cases, the ransomware, the malware that's on there that's going to start encrypting, will actually detect whether there's AV solutions running on that system, and then they'll try to hide themselves from that AV system. So, in most cases, there are the AV tools that are out there will do a decent job of trying to protect against ransomware, but honestly, there's not a silver bullet. But the AV solution will get you mostly there.
Okay, next is a second question from Max Media. How to stop other systems being affected?
Take them offline. There's no, once you detect, a lot of times the Security Operations Center will look to try to contain that attack. So if, for instance, if you're an organization and you have thousands of systems and within your network, you're going to try to contain the spread of that ransomware attack. So you might see some activity that's going after a database or some kind of file system, or file server or something like that, and you're then going to try to contain it to just those areas so it doesn't break out to other ones. So you might stop traffic from those servers going to anywhere else. You might take those systems offline, or just take them take them offline until you can get the issue remediated.
Okay. Next question from Security Tech, Thanks Derek. Ransomware-as-a-Service is very common nowadays. What would be the best strategy for any organization to defend such attacks or to limit the damage?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to just the cybersecurity hygiene. So making sure that that your systems are patched, making sure that you have alerting and monitoring, that you're vigilant, and that the security awareness. Again, it comes down to with ransomware as a service, it makes it easier, and I think you're going to see it more ransomware attacks happening. But the fundamentals of ransomware are still the same, where it's somebody that's trying to get malware onto a system and then get into an organization and try to encrypt data. That type of fundamental attack, that doesn't change. So I think it's a matter of making sure that you have the right controls in place, that you have endpoint protection, antivirus, and that you have the right security awareness in terms of don't click on links that you're not expecting, don't open up documents that you're not expecting. All those types of things that we talked about are still relevant, whether it's ransomware as a service or whether it's a one-off type of ransomware attack.
Let's wind up. Hope there are no more. Sorry, there's one question from Shyam. Is there any relationship between ransomware attack and cryptocurrency value?
I don't think so. But you will see that generally when attackers are demanding ransomware, they're not going to ask for a lot of Bitcoin. They're going to ask, for something that makes sense. Like if they're trying to target, an organization and they want to get, $1 million from them or something like that, they're going to aim for $1 million and just whatever that converts to in cryptocurrency. That's what they're going to ask for. So I don't think it really has a connection there between the price of Bitcoin or the price of cryptocurrency versus these attacks. But I would assume that supply and demand may have some effect on the price, but I don't think there's a direct connection between ransomware and cryptocurrency.
Okay. So I think let's wind up. So that was a very wonderful interaction, Mr. Fisher, and we received excellent insight on ransomware and how to deal with it. So we are very grateful for your expertise and your ideas. And on behalf of Hackpay, I extend our sincere thanks to you for being with us today.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank you
to
very
all who
much.
tuned in. Yeah. Thanks to all who tuned in. And if you have any additional queries, you can reach out to Derek Fisher through his LinkedIn handle. And thanks to all. So we have scheduled our next session in the series tomorrow, 28th June at 8 p.m. IST on the topic Samohya Madhyamangalam Nammalu, the perils and promise of social media. The session will be taken by Mr. Vinod Narayan, founder Penpost TV. So see you all again tomorrow. Stay safe. Thank you.